Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This video is going to be a true crime serial killers video. So let me start off this video with a trigger warning. This video entails the deaths of 7 people through violent means of stabbings, possible rapes, also gunshot wounds, and various means of finding the bodies in various states of decomposition. This is a story of a serial killer, so if you find any of these things to be triggering, I suggest you go ahead and click off of this video and tune into some of my more milder content found on other areas of my channel. With all of that said, let's get into this video. Okay guys, so I'm back to making my true crime serial killers videos. I took a break because I was trying to gather some information. I'm still working on a serial killer that's actually kind of closer to my home. There's just so much information compiled on him that it's taking me a while to sort through it. So I decided to take a break from that one and return to The Killer Book of Serial Killers and pull a killer from Australia. So I'm going to be covering Ivan Robert Marko Milat today. He was a serial killer in Australia. So let me go ahead and open up to his section. So let's talk a little bit about who Milat was. Milat was the son of a Yugoslavian couple. He was one of 14 children. He loved to hunt, and he was often in trouble with the police alongside some of his brothers. In 1971, he was tried for rape at knife point of 2 female hitchhikers, but the case was weak and he was acquitted. He was also suspected of other rapes, but the cases went nowhere due to lack of evidence, lack of witnesses. So, with all of that said, let's talk a little bit about a British tourist named Paul Onions. So I'm taking this straight from the book. Onions was hitchhiking near the Balago State Forest in Sydney in January 1990 when a silver 4-wheel drive vehicle stopped to pick him up. The driver, a well-tanned, tightly muscled man with handlebar mustache, invited him to hop in. Onions took off his backpack, put it in the seat, and climbed in. The 2 men started down the road. The driver said his name was Bill, and everything was fine at first. The men were making friendly conversation, then abruptly, Bill changed. He began probing Onion's life with inappropriate questions. That violated his personal privacy. Gradually, the man went into an enraged rant filled with racist remarks, including evictions against foreigners such as Onions, who was becoming more and more nervous about the driver's turn toward psychosis. They were half a mile north of Balago State Forest when the driver suddenly pulled to the side of the road and gun in hand, announced a robbery. The situation hardly seemed like a robbery. Why would a man driving an easily recognizable vehicle rob someone? What was he really going to do? Rob Onions and let him go so that he could go to the police? Didn't make any sense. Onion drew the terrifying conclusion that he was going to be killed. Abruptly leaving his backpack on the seat, Onions burst out of the door and started to run toward the forest. It was a run for his life. The man with the handlebar mustache was chasing after him and shooting, the bullets coming perilously close. Onion zigzagged his way through the forest. Once inside, he was able to gradually work his way to the road. He frantically flagged down a passing car and poured out the story of what had just happened, and the driver took him to the nearest police station. The police recorded all the details of what had occurred and had Onions describe Bill to a sketch artist. Onions didn't know at the time, but his chances of dying had he not bolted from the car were 100%. Without realizing it, he had encountered the serial killer Ivan Robert Marko Milat. So, with that story being told, let's get into the murders of Milat. September 1992, two British tourists, Carolyn Clark, who was 21 years old, and Joanne Walters, who was 22 years old. The two bodies were found at Executioner's Drop in Balago State Forest. The bodies were decomposed. The women went missing in mid-April. They weren't found until September. They were hitchhiking to Adelaide when they went missing. So they were hitchhiking along the road, going from one area to Adelaide, which would take them through Balago State Forest. And they went missing in mid-April. They were found in September of that year. They had been savagely attacked. Now we're going to get into the descriptions of the savage attack. Walters, who was the 22-year-old, had been stabbed in a frenzy. The medical examiner, from here on out, I'll refer to her as the ME, even stated one wound penetrated her through to her spine and probably even paralyzed her. So she had been stabbed so brutally that one of the stab wounds went through to her spine and probably paralyzed her in the middle of the attack. I mean, that's crazy, but it gets worse. The zipper on her jeans had been pulled down, but the top button was fastened as if she'd been raped, but the assailant was trying to hide it. Clark, the 21-year-old, was also stabbed repeatedly in a manic fashion and was shot 10 times in the head. The ME believed that the murderer had used Clark's head as target practice. So he probably killed her and then used her head for target practice. Near the dump site was a primitive brick fireplace that had been built. It was approximately 120 feet from the bodies. No one understood why the fireplace, but it was there. So media blasted reports of a serial killer, but the police were not supporting that assertion at that time. It was just two bodies. They weren't asserting that they had a serial killer, and no leads came in the case. A criminal profiler by the name of Dr. Rod Milton worked up a profile. He said the killer knew the area. He was in his mid-30s, had a history of aggression, but was not a serial killer. Nothing else from 1992. In 1993, they don't give a month, so we don't know how far from September. You gotta think, September 1992, not much left in that year. But in 1993, they find two Australians, James Gibson and Deborah Everest, both 19 years old, and they had been missing since 1989. So they've been missing for 4 years. Their decomposed bodies were found, and there were similarities between the Walters and Clark crime scenes. Gibson, who was the male zipper, was down, but the top button was fastened. Both were stabbed in a manic fashion. There was a small brick fireplace built near the bodies, and investigators at that time started to theorize that the killer was trying to simulate or symbolize some kind of family home scene, but they still didn't understand what was going on. This new crime scene caused the investigators to believe that they had a serial killer due to the fact that the victims had been missing for 4 years and were just now found, and this caused them to do a huge search in Balago State Park. 1 month after the discovery of Gibson at Everett, they found another body. This one was a German tourist by the name of Simone Schmidt. She had been missing since January of 1991, so she'd been missing for 2 years. She went missing while hitchhiking looking for work. They gave no details on her body or crime scene. in 1993. 3 days later, after finding Schmidt's body, they found 2 more German tourists, a Garber Nuremberg and Enja Husting. They did not give any ages, but the 2 had been savagely attacked. The pants of the young man had been unzipped but buttoned. The male had been strangled and shot many times. The woman was headless due to the rough cuts of her neck. She was decapitated. They believed that she had been decapitated by some means of a machete or sword. This made investigators finally admit that they had a serial killer. It took 7 bodies, but they finally admitted that they had a serial killer. And when the announcement was made officially by the police, leads started pouring in. And several of those leads pointed to Milat. The story started to spread across the world. And as soon as it hit Britain, Paul Onions, from the story that I told at the beginning of this video, jumped on a plane and came back to Australia. They had Paul Onions come in and do a video lineup. And he immediately picked out Milat. This led them to get a search warrant of Milat's property at Eagle Vale, which is a suburb of Sydney. The search found camping gear stolen from the victims, along with firearms that were connected to the killings. So now you had the property of the victims, you had forensic evidence that linked you to the victims. So Milat was charged and brought to trial in July 1996. But Milat's lawyer tried to blame 2 of Milat's brothers, Richard and Walter. And investigators really had a problem with saying that Milat did it by himself, because at the crime scenes they found cigarette butts. But here's the problem: Milat didn't smoke. None of this actually mattered, though, because Milat was convicted of the 7 murders, received 6 life sentences, plus 6 years for trying to gun down Onions. So Milat is also believed to be the perpetrator of other rapes and murders, some dating back to the early 1970s in other parts of Australia when he was there working. But due to lack of evidence, lack of witnesses wanting to come forward and being tied to Milat, those cases are not going anywhere. But, I mean, at this point, he's got 6 life sentences plus 6 years. I don't really think he's going anywhere. So, guys, that's going to end the story of Ivan Robert Marko Milat. Let me know down in the comment section, what do you think of this? Do you think that there were other people involved? What do you think the fireplace meant in the story? What do you think Milat was doing with the fireplaces? Also, give this video a thumbs up if you like it. Subscribe, ring that bell. I'm going to be bringing these videos back more mainstream. I've just got to get through this research on this one serial killer that I'm working on, and then I'll get these back up and running on a normal basis. Anyway, guys, down in the description box down below, you can find my Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and email. If you have information that you want to be seen brought into a video, just send it to me on one of those platforms, and I'll get it up for you. And if you do send me information that I make into a video, I'll shout you out in that video. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for me today, and I'll see you on the next one.